Listen, I need you to get something straight before we begin. I'm not some storyteller. I don't spin tales for attention. I'm just a man who was there, and every single night when I close my eyes, I hear it again. That noise, very dangerous. The pulse of the frozen ocean. You think I've lost it, don't you? The psychiatrist sure did. Said it was shell shock. But I've got proof, a satellite image from 18 months back, leaked then deleted within 3 hours. Shows a thermal signature in the Ross sector, right where we abandoned them. Right where Major Harding, where they all, look, you've got to hear this from the beginning. The whole damn story, because they're stirring now. And it's on us. If you've ever experienced something in your life that still haunts you, share it in the comments. 1952. March. I was a staff sergeant with the Navy, assigned to this special unit. Operation Frost Ridge, though nobody used that name out loud. On the official reports, just routine drills, cold weather equipment testing. But the whispers, God, the whispers started before we even sailed. Enemy remnants, hidden mineral veins. The truth was far darker. They showed us an audio file while we were anchored somewhere past Argentina. Wire recording, scratchy as hell. Dated March 9th, 52. You could barely parse the words through all that noise, but the speaker, a Navy flyer with Patrol Squadron 7, piloting one of those massive Martin flying boats over the Weddell, he was losing it. I mean, genuinely breaking down. Command, this is Foxtrot 4, signals weak. The skyline just vanished. Repeat, skyline gone. Instruments are spinning wild. There's no division between ocean and atmosphere. It's all one solid mass. It's observing us. I can sense it observing. Then his tone shifted completely. Hold on, that cloud bank, it's traveling against the jet stream. It's Jesus Christ, it's not vapor, it's dense. CLIMB, Hansen, SkillIMB, H. Hansen, SkillIMB, it's solid. And that was it. Transmission ended. Officially, that aircraft went down in freak cyclone conditions, lost with the entire crew. Families received folded flags and typed condolences from the secretary. But that recording told another story entirely, and we were headed straight toward those exact coordinates. The task force was an enormous carrier, escort ships, a sub, supply vessels, thousands of personnel. Our command ship was the USS Coral Sea. Leading operations was Major Harding, rigid type, starched his dress blues even when it hit -40, didn't buy into superstitions, didn't buy into unknowns, believed in navigation charts and direct orders and American firepower. That mindset? Dangerous. In the tropics, arrogance kills you. In Antarctica, it erases you from existence. Picture the environment. Antarctic midsummer, the sun barely dips, just paints everything this sickly violet shade. The water looks like charcoal. The ice formations, city block-sized, glowing with this eerie inner luminescence, like they're laced with radiation or something. Beautiful, but fundamentally wrong. You sense it deep in your bones. Captain Rhodes was one of our aviators, flew the Martin boats, those bulky seagoing aircraft. He'd done submarine patrols across the Pacific, knew how to interpret ocean behavior, but the sea down there? Completely off. In his flight journal, which I glimpsed later, photocopies anyway he documented, the stillness felt predatory, like the atmosphere was waiting to exhale. We're circling a cemetery that hasn't been dug yet. That was March 7th. 72 hours later, they dispatched him on extended reconnaissance. Chart the shoreline, identify landing zones. The maps we carried were ancient whaling charts from like the early 1900s. Fatally inaccurate. Rhodes climbed his bird to 6,000 feet. Nothing but engine drone and infinite white beneath. But as he pushed inland toward the continental interior, he spotted it. We nicknamed it the Rampart. Wasn't a glacier, glaciers are fractured, grimy, chaotic. This was a fortification, a perfectly vertical ice precipice rising 2,500 feet straight from the ocean. And it was flawless. Rhodes circled twice, and in his logbook wrote, the face had a sheen like polished obsidian, no irregular edges, no snow accumulation. It appeared machined. He radioed back, Tower, Foxtrot 4, visual confirmation of geographical obstruction, extends horizon to horizon, elevation 2,800 feet, looks like a constructed barrier over. The voice from the ship crackled with static. Foxtrot 4, state your next move. Running parallel, searching for a gap. He traced that wall for nearly 3 hours, 400 miles of seamless, mirror-smooth ice. Nature doesn't engineer straight edges for 400 miles. And the thermal activity you'd expect near massive ice structures, the air currents, the temperature shifts, nothing. The atmosphere was vacuum still, like the wall wasn't radiating anything, wasn't cold or warm. It was absence. Back aboard the flagship, the atmosphere was changing. A vessel is a living organism, right? It creaks, settles. But in those waters, every sound was muffled, suffocated. Deep in the support ship's research bay, there was this civilian scientist, Dr. Keller, thick lenses, anxious type, constantly fidgeting with his pen cap. He was supposed to be surveying mineral deposits, but he was monitoring the seawater intake sensors, and the data made zero sense. Antarctic ocean temperature should hover right at freezing, maybe half a degree below. But Keller was recording 36 degrees, 38, 40. It was warming steadily the nearer we approached the ice shelf. He went to Harding, said, "Major, we've got a thermal anomaly. Water temps climbed 7 degrees in 90 minutes. Harding barely glanced up. "Engine heat dispersal. Doctor, fleet's been idling here." "No, sir," respectfully. "We couldn't generate this volume of thermal energy if we melted every reactor. This heat is rising from below, from the continental platform." Harding turned slowly. "So you're proposing geothermal activity? My charts indicate a stable tectonic zone." "I don't know what it is," Keller admitted, "but the ice should be destabilizing, fracturing. But that wall, it's solid as reinforced concrete." "But that wall, it's solid as reinforced concrete." Harding dismissed him, but I caught the flicker of uncertainty. He ordered additional watch stations, tripled the lookouts. Didn't explain why to the crew, but sailors aren't fools. They knew something was twisted. You could sense it through the hull plating. Then there was Seaman First Class Davis, sonar tech on the icebreaker USS Glacier. His world was this dim chamber reeking of burnt coffee and electrical ozone, just the emerald sweep of the scope and that hypnotic pulse. Sonar is instinct, you learn, the crisp return of a submarine hull, the soft scatter of marine mammals, the rifle crack of fracturing ice. Davis had been on headset for 5 hours straight, mesmerizing pattern. Ping, 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 ping. But then he detected something different. A grinding noise like emery cloth on cement. Shh. He pressed the headphones harder, adjusted the sensitivity. Bearing 180, dead south. Directly from the ice barrier. Bridge, sonar, I've got a contact, passive detection only. Classify, came the reply. Unknown, sir, sounds like abrasion, possibly ice calving, but it wasn't calving. That would have been a single explosive event. This was sustained and intensifying. Davis switched to active sonar, transmitted a pulse. Ping. Waited. At this distance, the ice wall should return an immediate echo. Ping. Silence. Ping. Then a return, but not a defined line. A blur, a colossal shapeless mass of light blooming across the green display. Davis froze, calculated range. 4,000 yards out. Based on the signature size, it was massive. Larger than a destroyer. Larger than the Terrier. Bridge. Sonar. Contact confirmed. Range 4,000 yards, bearing 180, depth 500 feet. Repeat range 4,000 yards, sir. It's enormous. Submarine. Negative. Return signature is diffuse, no metallic characteristics, but sir, it's in motion. Velocity high. On the glacier's ridge. The commanding officer seized binoculars, scanning the slate gray surface. Lookouts report visual. Any disturbance? Negative wake, sir. Water's glassy. In the sonar compartment, Davis tracked the blur. It wasn't moving like any vessel. Ships travel in vectors. This thing was pulsing. Pause. Surge. Pause. And changing depth 500 feet to 200 in heartbeats. That pressure differential would implode reinforced steel. Bridge. Contact approaching. Range 500 yards. Speed calculation. Jesus. Speed 45 knots. 45 knots submerged. In 1952, physically impossible. The fastest submarines could barely manage 20, and only in short bursts. The grinding had ceased. Now beneath the sonar ping, Davis heard something else. A deep rhythmic pulsation. Thump, 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 thump. Like a heartbeat the size of a freight train. Bridge. It's on intercept course with the flagship, passing directly beneath our position now. On the Coral Sea's deck, crewmen were pausing mid-task. Couldn't see anything, but they could feel it. A low vibration propagating through the hull, rattling equipment on workbenches, tremoring in coffee mugs. Wasn't our engines. It was rising from the keel itself. Major Harding stood on the observation platform, staring down at perfectly calm, mirror-flat gray ocean. Major, the radio crackled. Glacier reporting, we have submerged contact, high velocity, passing beneath our hull, intercept trajectory with your position, time to contact, 90 seconds. Harding gripped the railing. Battle stations, he said quietly, then bellowed it, sound battle stations, all ahead full, hard port dreader. That alarm, that anguished, rising wail that floods your veins with pure adrenaline. Personnel scrambled, gunners swung the 40mm mounts around, targeting empty water. Where is it? Harding shouted. Where is the contact? Sonar reports directly beneath us, sir. Depth 60 feet. It's ascending. Harding looked over the side. The water alongside the carrier began churning, not from heat, from displacement. A massive dome swelled upward, driven by something titanic beneath. The ocean turned white with froth. For an instant, Harding thought submarine surfacing. Expected to see a conning tower. Wet metal. But what breached wasn't metal. It was translucent. Rose like a mountain of wet, clear crystal, shedding ocean in torrents. It was ice, but moving with intention, like a colossal berg had decided to erupt from the abyss. As the water cleared, Harding saw the structure wasn't natural chaos. It was segmented, articulated, like a crustacean's exoskeleton, but formed from compressed glacial ice. It towered above the flight deck, had to be 120 feet high. Then it stopped, just hung there in the water, motionless, defying physics. Silence on the bridge, only the slap of waves against hull and distant terrified shouting from below. What is that? The executive officer whispered. Is that a vessel? Harding didn't respond. He was staring at the core of the thing, deep within that translucent frozen shell, buried beneath layers of glacial armor. Something was radiating light, a faint, rhythmic crimson glow. Thump, 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 Major. The radio erupted again, Davis's voice cracking with terror. Sonar reading. Sir, the contact isn't solitary. I'm tracking multiple signatures. Repeat, multiple signatures ascending. They're encircling the entire formation. Harding scanned the horizon. All around the fleet, the charcoal water was boiling. Dozens of pale masses breaking the surface, surrounding us like predators. The radio frequency surged with interference, but cutting through, every officer on the bridge heard it. Wasn't machinery. Wasn't marine life. It was frozen mass modulated into a frequency that resonated in your jawbone, sounded almost like speech, deep and catastrophic, a language constructed from fracturing continental shelves. Harding grabbed the transmitter. All vessels, commence firing. Engage nearest target. Engage now. But before the weapons could speak, the ocean detonated. Not with flame, with absolute zero. A blast wave of freezing vapor erupted from the central mass, rolling across the Coral Sea's deck, instantly blinding the gun crews. And inside that white void, the screaming began. That shriek, tearing across the deck, wasn't human. Wasn't mechanical either. It was a harmonic vibration of grinding glaciers and escaping pressure, hitting a frequency so piercing it shattered the flood lamps. The fog dropped ambient temperature 60 degrees in moments. Personnel sweating in cold weather gear were suddenly choking as moisture in their airways crystallized solid. On the bridge, Harding was bellowing commands nobody could process. The communications network was pure deafening noise. Gunners on the forward mounts were blind, cranking targeting wheels, searching for anything in the white soup. You could hear the water churning beneath. Massive displacement. But visibility was zero. Perfect execution zone. If those shapes had been enemy submarines, we'd have been on the seafloor in under 3 minutes. But the assault never materialized. As violently as the ocean erupted, it went glass smooth. The vapor lingered another 90 seconds, then began dissipating. The screaming ceased. The vibration faded. "Sonar!" Harding shouted, voice fracturing. "Statue support, where are they?" Through the speaker, Davis's voice shook, but remained clear. "Contacts lost, sir. Screen is blank. They plummeted, sir, straight down like anchors." Harding sprinted to the observation deck. The ocean was empty. That massive cathedral of frozen architecture that breached moments before, gone. No disturbance, no wreckage, no residue. Just black, indifferent water, like the sea had hallucinated a mountain range and consumed it whole. This is where rational minds fracture. You witness something impossible and your consciousness scrambles to categorize it under anything that makes sense. For the crew, the explanation became thermal inversion illusions and atmospheric distortion. The official record lists a sudden localized atmospheric event and sonar anomalies caused by ice fragmentation, a fabrication, and every soul aboard knew it. But it was a fabrication we required, allowed us to return to stations without breaking completely. Major Harding, though, he wasn't the type to leave questions unanswered. Man needed concrete ground beneath his boots. If the water was haunted, he'd conquer the ice. 4 hours after the incident, he issued the directive that doomed us all. Ordered a forward operating base. They designated it Outpost Charlie, positioned directly at the base of that mirror-smooth barrier Rhodes had photographed from altitude. Military reasoning, you can't engage what you can't observe, and sonar was worthless. Harding wanted personnel on location, a staging platform to penetrate the barrier, discover what was generating that thermal energy. The landing was catastrophic. Landing craft navigating through Burgee bits, those dense ice fragments, to reach the shelf, and the ice there wasn't powder snow. It was solid azure concrete, wind-polished, frictionless. Picture 1,500 personnel constructing a settlement on a sheet of obsidian. Anchor bolts driving in, diesel generators thundering, tracked vehicle treads clanking as those snowcat transports got craned onto the surface. An invasion of mechanical noise in a place silent for geological epochs. And the ice didn't appreciate it. Corporal Jensen, heavy machinery operator, drafted a letter home that was never transmitted. He documented, "The ground here feels hollow. When I drop the blade, it doesn't crunch. It reverberates like I'm operating on top of a massive empty chamber." First 48 hours progressed according to plan. Quonset shelters erected, cargo offloaded, defensive perimeter established with machine gun emplacements facing the barrier. Then day 3 arrived, and the strangeness initiated with the excavation crews. Harding wanted a command bunker carved into the ice, wind shelter. Engineers deployed with picks and steam-powered drills got approximately 5 feet down when one struck something that sparked. Initially, they assumed bedrock. Antarctica has continental mass beneath the glaciers, but when they cleared the debris, metal, a cylindrical container, dull field gray, they summoned Dr. Keller up from the vessel. He arrived in expedition gear, gripping his equipment case, looking like a condemned man approaching execution. Knelt in the excavation, brushed away ice particles. "It's a fuel canister," Keller said, voice muffled behind his face covering. "Standard military issue. German naval markings." Harding nodded grimly. So the intelligence was accurate. Enemy forces operated here in 39. Left supply caches. "No, Major," Keller said, and he sounded nauseated. "Examine it closely." Harding leaned in. The canister wasn't simply buried in frozen precipitation, wasn't crushed or deformed. It was inside the ice. The crystalline structure didn't terminate at the metal surface. It penetrated through it. The ice occupied the same physical space as the steel, like the metal had been intangible when the water solidified, and inside, the fuel was frozen mid-wave, suspended in temporal stasis. "It's molecularly fused," Keller whispered. "At the atomic level, this canister wasn't deposited here. It shares physical space with the glacier. Physics dictates two masses can't occupy identical coordinates. But here they do." They discovered more. A supply crate, a firearm, a pair of boots, all merged with the continental ice. Perfectly preserved, no oxidation, but phantoms embedded in solid structure, like the glacier had simply decided these objects were part of its composition now. Harding stared at the weapon, a Mauser Kar 98 CAC, half embedded in the trench wall. "Extract it," he commanded, in the trench wall. "Extract it," he commanded. "Sir, we can't," an engineer protested. "Attempting removal will fracture it. It's integral to the formation." I ordered extraction, Harding Ward. They attempted it. Took a sledgehammer to the surrounding ice. First impact, the steel barrel disintegrated like ceramic, didn't deform, shattered into fragments, identical to the ice. The metal had assumed the properties of its medium. Harding turned away, complexion ashen. "Collapse it, fill the excavation, we dig elsewhere." Back aboard ship, Dr. Keller retreated to his laboratory. Man of empirical science, and science was abandoning him. He collected specimens, shards of that brittle metal, cores of the ice, examined them under magnification. What he observed kept him conscious for the remainder of the expedition. In a journal he concealed discovered later in his quarters. Keller described the ice not as mineral, but as biological tissue. The crystalline architecture is mimicking organic cellular organization, he documented. "I am observing frozen water that has evolved consciousness." Under high magnification, the molecules weren't arranged in the chaotic lattice of normal ice. They were in chains, and distributed among them, dormant but intact, were cells. Not microorganisms, not plant matter. Animal cells, stripped of nuclei, stripped of genetic identity, but present. A suspension of biological material frozen solid, awaiting activation. And thermal energy was the catalyst. Keller realized with visceral horror. The sample on his slide was responding to the microscope illumination. The heat from the bulb was causing the molecular chains to oscillate. The ice was absorbing the warmth. It was starving. "Major," he drafted in a report later recovered from his wastebasket, "we are not positioned on a glacier. We are positioned on a wound, and we are attempting to reopen it." While the surface team grappled with impossible physics, Captain Rhodes was airborne, fighting his own perception. Supply flights were constant now. Martin boats shuttling between carrier and forward base, transporting equipment. Short distance, 15 miles. But for aviators, he was running a gauntlet. Rhodes was at 2,500 feet, banking his flying boat over the shelf. From that elevation, the scale of the barrier was overwhelming, extended to the visible horizon, a pale gash across existence. But the interior surface, that disturbed him. Ice is static, frozen turbulence, chaotic peaks that don't shift. But as Rhodes observed the vast expanse behind the wall, he saw undulations, started as optical illusion, sun reflection off the glossy surface, but then he recognized the configuration, ripples traveling against prevailing winds, rhythmic, radiating outward from the continent's core like concentric rings from a dropped stone, but measured in miles. "Control. Foxtrot 4, he transmitted. "Observing surface displacement in grid sector 7. Appears seismic. The ice is pulsing. Foxtrot 4, control, negative on seismic activity. Instruments are dormant. You're observing thermal refraction. It's not refraction. Control. It's the continental mass. The ground is moving." Rhodes descended against protocol. Wanted visual confirmation. At 600 feet, the illusion dissolved, replaced by something worse. The ice wasn't continuous. It had apertures. Massive vertical shafts penetrating straight into darkness, arranged in a perfect geometric matrix. Respiration vents. As he crossed over one, his aircraft dropped. Not a mechanical failure, a vacuum. The shaft inhaled a colossal volume of atmosphere, dragging the heavy seaplane downward. Rhodes wrestled the controls, shoved the throttles to maximum. Engines howled, biting rarefied air, and he managed to recover altitude. "You feel that?" his co-pilot asked, complexion gray. "It pulled us down." "I felt it," Rhodes said, hands trembling. "Whatever exists beneath, it just inhaled." By the time they touched down at the outpost, conditions had deteriorated. But it wasn't meteorological. No cloud formations advancing from the ocean. This phenomenon originated from below. A fog bleeding directly from the ice, not water condensation. Dense opalescent vapor that reeked of ozone and metallic copper clung to the surface, rising until it consumed the shelters, the aircraft, the personnel. Visibility collapsed to nothing. Worse than blindness was the disconnection. Radio equipment failed first. High-frequency transmitters to the ships dissolved into static. But the short-range tactical radios for perimeter sentries started receiving something else. Began as murmuring, low garbled transmission like frequency overlap. Seaman Davis had come ashore to assist with communications relay. Sat in the radio tent, headphones clamped, eyes dilated. "I can't filter it out," Davis told the Marine duty sergeant. "It's broadcasting on every channel. It's frequency hopping. Enemy jamming." "It's not jamming," Davis whispered. "Listen." He disconnected the headset, activated the speaker. Through the interference emerged a voice. Flat, monotone, devoid of human inflection. Sounded like a recording played at incorrect speed. Foxtrot 4, skyline vanished, solid. It was the transmission of the aviator from the lost reconnaissance flight, the one that disappeared days prior. The sergeant went colorless. "That's Lieutenant Harris. Is he transmitting from somewhere out there?" Then the voice transformed, deeper, rougher. "Contact. Range 4,000 yards. "That's me," Davis said, backing away from the equipment. "That's my transmission from the sonar compartment yesterday." The radio cycled through them, fragments of galley discussions, deck commands, berthing area murmurs. It was reconstructing them, cutting and splicing into new phrases. "Commence, firing, extracted, observing us." "Kill the power," the sergeant ordered. Davis reached for the switch, but the voice transformed again. This time it was unfamiliar. Spoke with Harding's inflection, perfect reproduction. "Permit us entry." Davis ripped the power cable. The tent went silent, except for ragged breathing. Outside, the fog was impenetrable. Perimeter sentries positioned 70 yards out were isolated. Field telephone lines to command post were dead. "We need to verify the positions," the sergeant said. "If there's a hostile element using our transmissions, it's not an element," Davis interrupted. "It's the vapor. The fog is conducting sound, amplifying it." They waited 4 hours. The outpost became a mausoleum. Personnel sat in shelters, weapons aimed at entryways, listening to wind that wasn't wind. They heard movement on rooftops, heard their own name summoned from darkness. "Corporal, assist me. It's freezing. Daunt unseal the door," someone bellowed. "Please, allow me inside." Psychological assault tactics. The presence, whatever it was, adapting, sampling our terror, reflecting it back. Sampling our terror. Then, as abruptly as it materialized, the fog dissolved. Wind intensified, dispersed the vapor, revealing the barren terrain under perpetual twilight. Vessels were visible in the anchorage again, carrier illumination glittering. "Verify the perimeter," the executive officer shouted, emerging from command shelter. "Report status. Position 1. Position 1, secure. Position 2, secure. Position 2, secure. Position 2, report. Position 3, silence. Position 3, respond. Nothing." A squad mobilized, sprinted across crunching ice toward the eastern boundary where Position 3 overlooked the barrier. Fortifications were intact. The heavy machine gun sat on its mount, ammunition belt loaded, thermos of coffee still radiating heat on a supply crate. But the personnel, 3 Marines, combat-hardened veterans, vanished. No blood, no drag patterns, no evidence of confrontation. But in the snow, arranged in a perfect equilateral triangle where they'd stood guard, were their weapons. Standing vertical, balanced on stocks, muzzles aimed skyward. Hadn't toppled. They'd been positioned. "Where are they?" a private asked, voice escalating. "Where the hell did they go?" The squad leader approached the rifles, extended his hand to disturb one. "Contact it," he commanded. "Why not, Sergeant? Examine the stone around the bases." The ice wasn't disturbed, no footprints departing, but the ice itself had altered. Wasn't opaque anymore, it was crystalline. And deep beneath, approximately 3 feet down, were 3 dark silhouettes. They resembled shadows cast by absence, roughly human proportioned, curled into fetal configurations, encased in the continental shelf. The sergeant aimed his flashlight downward. The beam penetrated and illuminated a section of uniform, rank insignia. A hand. The hand wasn't stationary. It was shifting. Fingers twitching, scratching slowly, rhythmically against the interior of the ice, attempting to burrow deeper. "Jesus Christ," the private whispered. "They're embedded. They're inside the ground." "White reach draw," the sergeant said, charging his submachine gun. Everyone back, get the Major, get Dr. Keller, now. But as they retreated, get Dr. Keller, now. But as they retreated, the rifles began descending. Slowly, silently, the ice consumed them. Stocks dipped below surface, then trigger mechanisms, then barrels. Within moments, gone. Pulled downward without creating apertures. The ice smoothed over, flawless again, pristine. And from beneath their boots felt more than audible. Emerged that sound. Thump, 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 thump. The pulse was intensifying, and now it was directly beneath the encampment. Harding arrived 15 minutes later, expression a mask of controlled rage. Examined the location where his personnel disappeared, then the barrier. They didn't abandon position, Harding said. Voice glacial. They were extracted. Sir, Dr. Stocktor, Keller said, arriving breathless. We must evacuate. Thermal readings. The ice is heating again. It's responding to our occupation. We are nourishing it. We are not retreating. Harding snapped. We are not withdrawing from a geological anomaly. We are going to recover those men. You can't recover them, Keller shouted, losing composure. They aren't missing. They've been absorbed. Don't you comprehend? This isn't terrain. It's a digestive system. Harding seized Keller by the parka collar. Regain control, Doctor. This is a military deployment. We've been attacked. We are going to retaliate. He turned to his executive officer. Mobilize the air wing. Prepare for offensive strike. High explosive ordnance. We are going to fracture that barrier open. Sir, the XO hesitated, bombing the continental shelf if we trigger destabilization. We are going to penetrate it, Harding said, staring at the translucent fortification. Whatever abducted my personnel is concealed behind that wall. I'm going to incinerate it. As directives were transmitted and aircraft engines ignited, Seaman Davis sat isolated in the communications tent. He'd reconnected the headset, wasn't monitoring static anymore, was monitoring the voice. It was clarified now, wasn't reconstructing fragments, was articulating a statement repeatedly in a tone like fracturing bone. Do not rupture the seal. Davis observed the radio equipment, then the tent opening where departing bombers vibrated the ground. He keyed the transmitter to alert them, but his hand paralyzed, because he recognized the voice wasn't originating from the radio. It was originating from his own throat. Seaman Davis clamped his hand across his mouth so forcefully, I thought he'd fracture his jaw. Eyes dilated, white terror rims, staring at me like pleading for confirmation he hadn't just vocalized those words. But I couldn't fabricate comfort. I'd heard it. The sergeant had heard it. Wasn't Davis's voice. It was a grinding tectonic resonance that had utilized his vocal apparatus like a puppet uses strings. Do not rupture the seal. The words suspended in the frigid atmosphere, heavier than the vapor. Davis scrambled backward, toppled his chair, collided with the canvas barrier. Hyperventilating, clawing his throat, attempting to expel that voice's residue. Get him evacuated, the sergeant barked at me, though his tone trembled. Transfer him to medical shelter. Inform the physician tell him he's combat ineffective, shock trauma, something. I grabbed Davis by the harness. He was limp weight, legs non-functional, eyes fixated on the radio like it was volatile ordnance. I dragged him into the snow, into the blinding radiance of perpetual daylight. The atmosphere was sharp, painfully pure after the ozone contamination, but it didn't feel secure, felt exposed. That was the instant the atmosphere at Outpost Charlie shifted from confusion to visceral dread. Until then, we could rationalize it was enemy operations, signal jamming, concealed speakers, psychological tactics. But you don't hallucinate a transmission from your comrade's mouth. You don't hallucinate 3 Marines descending into solid ice like liquid mud. I transferred Davis to a corpsman and proceeded toward command post. Needed intelligence on Harding's intentions. Needed confirmation if we were extracting. But Major Harding wasn't organizing withdrawal. He was escalating commitment. When I reached the CP, the environment was frantic. Runners sprinting between structures, slipping on ice. Field telephones ringing. Hard lines functional again now that fog had cleared. But conversations weren't about evacuation. They were about targeting coordinates. Harding stood over a planning table outside, ignoring the wind. Dr. Keller was with him, waving documentation in his face, gestures frantic and desperate. I moved nearer, pretending to verify perimeter communications, but genuinely just monitoring. "You cannot execute this, Major," Keller shouted. "Examine the thermal gradient. The barrier is spiking. It's elevated another 15 degrees. Since the personnel disappeared, it's responding to disturbance. If you strike it with high explosives, you are breaching an obstruction. You're provoking a living system." Harding didn't acknowledge him, traced a line in crimson grease marker from the carrier's flight deck to a coordinate on the wall's 600 feet elevation. "It's ice, Doctor," Harding said, voice flat and lethal. "Water molecules in crystalline formation. It doesn't possess consciousness. It's an obstacle. Since it consumed 3 of my personnel, I'm eliminating it." "It's not ice," Keller screamed, gripping the table. "It's a membrane. I've analyzed the specimens. The architecture is biological. It's a wound covering, Major. A thermal barrier containing something massive and superheated. If you rupture it, the pressure differential alone." Harding signaled 2 military police. "Escort the doctor to the shoreline. First transport back to the Coral Sea. If he resists, sedate him." Keller went limp. Didn't struggle, just observed Harding with pity that chilled me worse than the temperature. "You're going to release it, God have mercy. You're going to release it. God have mercy. You're going to release it." Harding observed, then tapped the map with his marker. Noticed me for the first time. "Sergeant," he said, "assemble a detail, visual confirmation of target zone before aircraft arrive. Proceed to the barrier base. Verify structural characteristics. I need intelligence on caves, fissures, anything those personnel could have been dragged into. If there's an entrance, I want it located before we demolish it." "Yes, sir," I said. I didn't want to approach that wall again. None of us did. But in 1952, you didn't refuse a major. I selected 4 personnel. We verified weapons. Thompson guns and M1 rifles. Useless against ice, but psychologically reassuring. And departed. The traverse was only 3/4 of a mile, but it felt like crossing an alien world. Absolute silence, no wildlife, no wind. Just crampons crunching on azure ice. As we approached the barrier, the magnitude struck me again. It wasn't simply a precipice. It was a monolith, obscured half the visible sky, a seamless curtain of translucent cobalt that appeared to radiate with internal luminescence, and it was warm. That's what triggered alarm. The nearer we approached, the warmer. 15 yards out, I unsealed my parka. 10 yards out, I could sense radiant thermal energy from the ice face, like standing adjacent to a furnace door that wasn't completely sealed. "Examine this," a private said, directing his flashlight at the ground. We assembled around. In the snow at the foundation, there were impressions, boot tracks, standard Navy shore boots, originated from position 3's direction, weaving slightly like the personnel had been disoriented. They approached directly to the wall and didn't terminate. I knelt, contacted the final impression. Heel was defined in snow, but the toe was inside the wall. Ice hadn't fractured, hadn't shattered, appeared like the boot had stepped into liquid that instantaneously solidified. The tracks simply merged into the cliff surface. "They entered," the private whispered. "They just walked inside." I directed my light into the ice. Translucency extended 4 or 5 feet before becoming opaque. But within that depth, I observed faint, dark striations. Veins pulsating slowly with deep violet liquid. "Return to command post," I said, standing. "We're finished. There's no entrance. The wall eye is the entrance." We sprinted back. I transmitted what we discovered to Harding, but he was beyond receiving intelligence. Radio in the command tent crackled with aviation wing communications. "Flight leader to base. We are en route. Altitude 6,000. Ordnance is hot. 4 Douglas Dauntless aircraft. Dive bombers carrying 2,000-pound bunker-penetrating munitions designed for reinforced concrete targets. Excessive for ice, or perhaps inadequate." I stood outside, shielding my vision, observing the sky. Drone of turbines intensified, a swarm of predatory insects. I spotted them circling once, high above the barrier. Dark silhouettes against bruised violet atmosphere. Base flight commander, visual confirmation on target, initiating attack run. First aircraft tilted its wing, rolled into descent, screamed downward, Engine pitch climbing to a whale. I observed the ordnance separate, arc toward the ice wall, precisely where the Marines disappeared. I anticipated detonation, expected a cascade of ice fragments, white eruption, thunder. The bomb impacted, didn't explode outward. It penetrated inward. For a fraction of a second, orange fire flashed deep within the ice, muffled like ignition underwater. Then the sound reached us. Wasn't a detonation. It was a thud, wet, heavy impact that trembled the ground, not with vibration, but with convulsion. The shelf didn't rattle. It spasmed. Second bomb struck. Third, the barrier fragmented, but not into dry shards. Massive, wet chunks of slush cascaded downward, and from the aperture a crater, perhaps 70 feet diameter. Something began hemorrhaging. It was azure, not pale glacial blue. Deep, viscous, electric cobalt gushed from the wound like arterial spray, steaming in frigid atmosphere, contacted the snow at the base, hissed, melted through, pooling in a steaming lake, spreading toward our position. "Is that water?" someone asked. "It's too dense," I said, backing away. "Appears like." I didn't want to articulate it. It resembled blood. On the radio, Flight Commander's transmission returned, tense and disoriented. Base, direct hits. Target is, hemorrhaging. Confirmed target is hemorrhaging liquid, no structural collapse, it's just bleeding. Back aboard the Coral Say, Seaman Davis had been sedated. But the pharmaceuticals weren't effective. He was in medical bay, thrashing against restraints. When the bombs detonated, he ceased screaming and went rigid. Eyes reversed, mouth opened. He didn't speak, just produced a sound, low guttural moan, that matched the vibration through the hull. But Davis wasn't the only one recording the sound. On the bridge, hydrophones detected something that made sonar technicians tear their headsets off. It was a scream, not from atmosphere, but from Earth. The explosion had propagated through ice, penetrated into bedrock, triggered a response. Low-frequency resonance beneath human auditory range, but sufficient to rattle hull rivets. A sound of agony. Then the temperature collapsed. Didn't decline gradually. It plummeted. Thermometer outside command shelter dropped from -15 to -70 in 90 seconds. Atmosphere instantly transformed into fog of ice particles. Vapor rising from azure liquid at the barrier's base flash froze into bizarre contorted sculptures. "Get personnel inside," Harding shouted, sprinting from the tent. "I inside D now. Seal the ventilation." But it was catastrophic for the ocean. Water in the anchorage, which had been unnaturally warm, reacted instantaneously. Surface flash froze. I observed waves surrounding the destroyers, simply arrested, transforming into jagged gray ice formations. Hulls groaned under sudden compression as the sea clamped down. We scrambled into Quonset shelters, slammed hatches, huddled around heaters sputtering in the vacuum of cold. Metal walls popped and contracted. "What did we strike?" a young private whispered, staring at frost racing across window glass. "What did we just hit?" I didn't respond. I was monitoring the radio. Ground communications were dead again, frozen out, but the aviation frequency remained operational. I could hear Captain Rhodes. Rhodes hadn't participated in the bombing operation. He was flying a Martin boat on search and rescue orbit, holding back at 6,000 feet to observe for survivors. He had optimal vantage. "Base, this is Foxtrot 4, Rhodes said, voice controlled but artificial, brittle control of a man who recognizes he's about to die. "I am positioned over target zone. I am observing down into the rupture. Foxtrot 4, report damage evaluation." Harding interrupted, sounding diminished and small. "There is no damage. Command," Rhodes said. "The ice is regenerating, the fluid is sealing the gap, but I can observe interior." The explosion illuminated it. Long silence, just engine hum and interference. "It's not a barrier," Rhodes said quietly. "It's a carapace. It's hollow. I can see, oh God." Foxtrot 4, clarify. "What do you observe?" "It's a metropolis," Rhodes said. "But it's not constructed. It's cultivated. There are towers, miles high, composed of that crystalline material, suspended inverted from the cavern ceiling and the floor. The floor is shifting." "Rhodes, abort immediately," Harding commanded. I can't, Rhodes said. They've detected me. Who has detected you? The apertures, Rhodes whispered. Thousands of them embedded in the ice in the spires. They just opened. They're fixated directly on me. Then his engine sound transformed. Steady drones sputtered, coughed, expired. Mayday, mayday, Rhodes said, voice stripped of panic, just catastrophic resignation. Engines terminated, intake temperature reading. Absolute zero, losing altitude, descending into the rupture. Ardas, eject, Harding screamed. Abandon aircraft. There's nowhere to descend to, Major, Rhodes replied. The atmosphere down there, it's not atmosphere, it's particulate. I can observe them ascending, rising to intercept me. Foxtrot 4. Foxtrot 4. It's magnificent, Rhodes said, and he sounded like he was smiling. Resembles the night sky, but the stars are blinking. Inform my wife, tell her I didn't crash, tell her I was welcomed. Transmission severed. Not to static, but to a high-frequency shriek that detonated the speaker in the command tent. Smoke spiraled from the radio equipment. Outside, wind initiated howling, but it wasn't transporting snow anymore. It was transporting that azure powder. Frozen particles of liquid from the wall rattled against the corrugated roof like shrapnel. I observed the personnel around me, huddled in expedition gear, weapons gripped, eyes vacant. We were stranded on a shelf of hemorrhaging ice, staring at a frozen ocean that held our only extraction route, while an aviator descended into an aperture leading to nightmare. The door to the shelter detonated open. Major Harding stood there, wind whipping his hood. He appeared diminished. The arrogance was obliterated, replaced by terrified clarity of a man who comprehends he's issued a directive he can never retract. Mobilize the tracked vehicles, Harding said, voice barely audible over wind. Load all equipment. We are abandoning the forward base. Sir, I asked, standing. The vessels are frozen into the bay. We can't reach them. We aren't proceeding to the vessels, Harding said, indicating south, away from water, toward the only formation that appeared stable. The ice shelf is fracturing. Vibrations. The entire platform is about to collapse. We remain here. We descend into the ocean. We must move inland. Inland? I stared at the wall. Sir, inland is where that entity exists. We have no alternative, Harding said. The glacier is transmitting. They're attempting to ram a channel through the flash freeze. They can approach the western extraction coordinates, but we must rendezvous. That requires driving parallel to the barrier. He observed me, and for the first time I witnessed terror in his expression. We must drive past the rupture, he said, and pray that whatever Rhodes observed down there remains down there. We loaded equipment. Snow tractor engines coughed and sputtered in the extreme cold, but they ignited. We piled inside, 15 personnel per vehicle, shivering, not exclusively from temperature. As we departed camp, abandoning shelters and supplies, I glanced back at the wall. The aperture the bombs created was radiating, soft rhythmic violet luminescence pulsing from deep interior, illuminating swirling precipitation. And in that light, I observed silhouettes shifting. Not inside the aperture, emerging from it. They resembled arachnids constructed from crystal, jagged and angular, pulling themselves over the crater edge with excessive limbs, large as the vehicles we occupied. And rapid. Driver, I screamed, hammering the roof. AC Trillet, now. Tracks spun, bit into azure ice, and we surged forward into blinding white, racing against the swarm of entities awakened by 2,000 pounds of high explosive. We hit maximum velocity, lead vehicle, compressed in rear with 12 other personnel, staring through the aft viewport, glass frosting over, but through the spiderweb of ice, I could observe them approaching. They weren't pursuing, they were flowing, moved with jerky, disjointed fluidity, like stop-motion animation corrupted, translucent, identical material as the barrier, compressed, living ice. You couldn't observe them distinctly until they shifted against snow, jagged, angular, appendages with excessive joints. Foster, I shouted at the driver. They're closing distance. I'm redlining it. Sergeant, he yelled back. Ice is too frictionless. We're sliding. We were sliding. Entire convoy of 5 vehicles drifting laterally, fishtailing. Behind us, the first creature reached the rearmost transport. Didn't assault like an organism. Didn't bite or claw. It simply collided. I observed in horror as it impacted the track. Didn't ricochet. It fragmented on contact, detonating into razor-edge shards. But the fragments didn't descend. They adhered to the metal, fused instantaneously to the steel hull, propagating like accelerated frost. The vehicle veered right, track seized, crashed into an ice formation. Engine terminated. Halt, a private screamed. We must retrieve them. Don't halt. Harding's transmission cut through. Maintain velocity. That's a direct order. Continue moving. I observed through rear window as personnel in the disabled transport attempted evacuation. Hatch flew open. Corporal scrambled onto ice. Rifle elevated. Discharged 2 rounds, bright flashes, before the swarm engulfed him. They didn't dismember him. They swarmed over him, buried him beneath shifting, clicking crystal. Within moments, vanished. Not consumed. Assimilated. The mass of creatures absorbed him, merged with his gear, his equipment, his tissue, until there was simply a new, larger configuration rising from snow. Ease forward, I shouted at my personnel, dragging the private from the viewport. Don't observe, reload, prepare. We drove for what felt like geological time, but was perhaps. We drove for what felt like geological time, but was perhaps 30 minutes. The swarm didn't pursue beyond the initial kilometer. They arrested at the crater perimeter, like tethered to the rupture by invisible constraint. But we weren't secure. The shelf itself was awakening. The ground beneath tracks began undulating, not seismic activity, more like slow rhythmic respiration of a dormant colossus. Fractures materialized in azure surface, shooting ahead like electricity, widening into hissing fissures, venting vapor. Turn right, I shouted. Hard right. Fissure ahead. Driver yanked controls and we careened away from a chasm opening in our trajectory. I observed downward as we skirted the edge. Wasn't darkness below. It was luminescent, same sickly violet light pulsed from depths, illuminating internal architecture. Resembled the interior of pulmonary tissue. We were heading west, attempting to intercept the glacier. The icebreaker was our solitary option. Remainder of the fleet was frozen into position, trapped in the anchorage, but the glacier had reinforced hull plating, engines designed to fracture pack ice. If they could fracture a channel near enough to shelf boundary, we might have possibility. But as we drove, radio crackled again. Wasn't Harding, wasn't the vessel base. This is Foxtrot 4. I am grounded. Repeat, I am grounded. It was Captain Rhodes. The cabin went silent. Every soul stared at the speaker. Rhodes had descended into the rupture. Should be deceased. Frozen. Obliterated. Dissolved. Foxtrot 4, this is Convoy Commander, Harding replied, voice trembling. Rhodes, is that you? I'm here, Major, Rhodes said, crystal clear. Devoid of interference we'd endured for days. Sounded excessively clear, like he was positioned to me. I didn't crash. The particulate, it cushioned the aircraft. It's soft down here. Where are you, Rhodes? Harding asked. I'm in the metropolis, Rhodes said. The metropolis of crystal. It's enormous, Major. Towers extend infinitely, and the thermal energy, towers extend infinitely, and the thermal energy, it's so warm, like midsummer. You should observe the entities that inhabit here. They aren't hostile. They're cultivators. Rhodes, listen, Harding said. We are proceeding to extraction. Can you mobilize? Reach the surface? Why would I want to depart? Rhodes asked, genuinely perplexed. It's perfect here. No cold, no conflict. Just the pulse. Can you hear it? Thump, 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 thump. Terminate the transmission, I whispered to the radio technician. Cut it. No, Harding said. Maintain the connection. Rhodes, what are they doing? They're repairing me, Rhodes said. My leg fractured in the descent. But the ice, it proliferated into the bone. It sutured me back together. Feels cold, but beneficial. I can sense the others too. The Marines from the outpost. They're here. They're integrated into the barrier now. They transmit greetings. Major. Then his tone transformed. Warmth evaporated, replaced by flat analytical delivery. They recognize you're evacuating, Rhodes said. They don't appreciate that you ruptured the seal. You permitted the cold to penetrate. Now they must seal it. And they require material to repair the aperture. What kind of material to repair the aperture? What kind of material? Harding asked. Biomass, Rhodes said. Carbon, calcium, thermal energy. They require you, Major. They're approaching to harvest. Transmission terminated with a sound I'll eternally remember. Human voice merging with grinding ice. Began as laughter. Concluded as a shriek of fragmenting crystal. Contact forward, the driver screamed. I looked ahead. Before us, the horizon was shifting. Wasn't the arachnid entities this time. It was atmospheric. A barrier of white rolling toward us against prevailing winds. Dense cloud of ice fragments. Millions of them spiraling in a vortex extending from ice to atmosphere. It's a whiteout, I yelled. Seal everything. Close the ventilation. The storm detonated like physical assault. Transport shuddered as wind slammed the exterior. Visibility collapsed to zero instantaneously. World outside transformed milky opaque white. But it wasn't exclusively precipitation. The fragments impacted the metal hull with ballistic force. Ping, ping, ping. We can't observe, the driver shouted. I'm navigating blind. Maintain velocity, I commanded. Compass bearing 270. Don't halt. But we were decelerating, engine laboring. I examined temperature gauge. It was plummeting. Storm was extracting thermal energy from the engine block. We're losing power, driver said. Intake is obstructing. Then the roof began deforming. Something massive landed on top. Heard screech of talons dragging across metal. Then another impact, and another. They're on the roof, a private screamed, elevating his rifle. Don't fire! I seized his barrel. You'll penetrate the hull if that atmosphere enters. We freeze. Roof buckled inward. A seam ruptured, and a blast of freezing atmosphere hissed inside. With it emerged a translucent, jagged appendage, like a spear constructed from ice, probing blindly. It struck the radio technician in the shoulder. He didn't scream, just gasped as the appendage pierced his parka and penetrated tissue. But there was no hemorrhaging. The appendage pulsed, radiating faint azure, and I observed as his skin transformed gray, then white, then transparent. Frost propagated from the wound, racing across his torso, up his throat. His eyes dilated, freezing open. Within moments, he was a sculpture. His eyes dilated, freezing open. Within moments, he was a sculpture. I extracted my combat knife, useless against steel, but I had to act. Slammed the blade into the ice appendage. It fragmented. The creature on the roof shrieked a high crystalline resonance and retracted the stump. Seal the breach, I yelled. Stuff it with anything, blankets, equipment. We jammed sleeping gear into the aperture, holding them against the wind. The technician was gone, sat in his position, perfectly preserved, shock frozen on his expression. Major, I grabbed the radio transmitter, praying it functioned. We are under assault. They're boarding the transports, taking casualties. Hold position. Sergeant. Harding's transmission returned, distant. We have visual on vessel, the glacier, 3 kilometers out. 3 kilometers out dash. 30 kilometers in this storm, that was eternity. Suddenly, the transport lurched to complete halt. Engine terminated completely. It's dead, driver yelled, cranking the ignition, frozen solid. We were stationary targets, wind howled outside, more impacts as creatures descended. Metal groaned. They were attempting to dismantle us like a container. Everybody evacuate, I commanded. Sprint for the lead transport, move. I kicked the rear hatch open. Wind detonated like a hammer, knocked respiration from lungs, stumbled onto ice, weapon elevated, world was swirling chaos of white, could barely observe Harding's command vehicle tail illumination ahead. Go, go, signaled personnel out. They scrambled into snow, slipping, collapsing. The creatures were waiting. They descended from our transport's roof, landing among us. Up close, catastrophic, no facial features, just faceted surfaces that reflected dim luminescence. Moved with catastrophic velocity, lashing out. I discharged my submachine gun. 45 caliber rounds sparked off ice armor, chipped it, but didn't arrest them. One lunged at a private, wrapped its appendages around him. He screamed as assimilation initiated, body rigidifying, screams transforming to grinding ice resonance. RUN, I shouted, grabbing the nearest individual, propelling him toward illumination ahead. We sprinted through blizzard, cold incinerated lungs, goggles frosting over, fired blindly behind, just attempting to suppress them. Ahead, I observed Harding's transport. It had halted, rear hatch open, personnel firing into storm. Geet misdied, Harding yelled, leaning out, discharging a sidearm. We dove into rear, piling on each other. I slammed the hatch, secured it. A ceaslerate, Harsiclerate, Harding yelled at his driver. Transport lurched forward. Reduced to 2 transports now, mine was obliterated. Third one was absent. Where's the remainder of convoy? I gasped, wiping frost from face. Gone, Harding said grimly, descended into a fissure. Ice just opened beneath them. We drove in silence for another kilometer. Storm raged against Hull, but assault ceased. Approaching water, atmosphere felt altered, damp, saline. Then fog cleared. We erupted from stormfront onto shelf boundary. Ahead, fracturing through pack ice, was the USS Glacier, magnificent sight. Black exhaust from stack, search beams sweeping. But between us and the vessel, the ice was fractured. A jagged channel of open water 70 feet width separated us. We can't cross, driver said. It's open water. Harding seized radio. Glacier, this is convoy commander at rendezvous. Severed. Gap is 70 feet. Copy, commander, vessel's captain replied. Can't approach nearer. Ice excessive density replied. Can't approach nearer. Ice excessive density, launching helicopter, standby for extraction. A helicopter. One helicopter. One helicopter. Sikorsky H-5 could transport 4 passengers, perhaps 5 compressed. 28 of us remaining. Harding observed me. We calculated. We establish perimeter, Harding said. Hold here. Evacuate wounded first. We deployed in defensive formation around transports. Helicopter lifted from icebreaker. Rotors churning frigid atmosphere, agonizingly gradual. As it approached, I glanced back. Storm maintained its position, towering barrier of white 1 kilometer back. But something was emerging. It wasn't the arachnids. It was a wave. The ice shelf itself was undulating, a ridge of ice 15 feet elevation moving toward us like a tsunami frozen in temporal suspension, pushing snow ahead, crushing everything. And riding the crest were silhouettes of personnel, the Marines, the vanished ones, the assimilated, half merged with the wave. Torsos rising from ice like shipped figureheads, eyes radiating violet, mouths opened in silent screams. And they were indicating us. Fair, they approach, I shouted. Open fire. We unleashed everything. Rifles, machine guns, grenades. Projectiles slammed into wave, chipped ice, but it didn't arrest, absorbed impacts. Helicopter contacted down behind us, rotor wash expelled, blinding snow. Wounded first, Harding yelled, get them aboard. We loaded 4 personnel, frostbite casualties, and the technician who'd been impaled, though he resembled sculpture more than human. Helicopter lifted, banking hard toward vessel. It's going to require 15 minutes for circuit, I yelled at Harding. We don't have 15 minutes. Wave was approaching, 150 yards out. I could hear the sound now, that pulse. Thump, 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 thump. Deepening. Ice beneath our boots vibrated synchronously. We need to decelerate it, Harding said, observing the transport. Fuel reservoirs. Rig them to detonate. We scrambled, pulled drain mechanisms, permitted high-octane fuel to hemorrhage onto ice, rigged an explosive with tripwire. Wit Oitstra, Harding commanded. To the boundary. We retreated to water channel edge. Wave impacted the transport. Explosive trip detonation. Massive fireball rolled upward, transforming twilight into daylight. Thermal energy was intense. For a moment, wave arrested. Fire melted front surface, transformed assimilated Marines to slush. They dissolved. Configurations losing cohesion, sliding back into mass. It's functioning, a private yelled. Fire functions. It's purchasing time, Harding said. That's all. Fire extinguished, wave reconstructed, more hostile now. Violet luminescence pulsed, intensified, and from the summit, a new configuration emerged. It was Rhodes, or what remained of him, fused to ice from waist downward. Flight suit tattered, skin translucent and radiating. He observed us, expression calm, almost serene. Major, Rhoda's voice resonated, amplified by ice itself. Why do you resist? It's warm here. We are unified. You are deceased. Rhodes, Harding shouted, elevating his rifle. I am not deceased, Rhodes said. I am evolved. The seal must be restored. You are the material. He elevated his hand. Ice waves surged forward. Helicopter was returning, excessively gradual. Wave would strike before it descended. We must jump, I said, observing black water in channel, 70 feet across, filled with slush and lethal cold. Swim in that water, Harding said. You'll survive 40 seconds. Superior to that, I said, indicating wave. Harding observed 40 seconds. Harding observed Rhodes, then the water nodded. Everyone into the channel, Harding commanded. Go now. We jumped. Shock of cold was instantaneous, felt like being struck by a freight train, muscles paralyzed, respiration arrested. I thrashed in black slush, attempting to maintain buoyancy. Observed Harding impact adjacent to me. He surfaced, gasping, complexion transforming, azure instantaneously. Behind us, wave reached shelf boundary. Rhodes leaned over, observing downward. Didn't pursue. Entity couldn't traverse open water. Salt water was the barrier. Freshwater organism. You cannot depart, Rhodes whispered, voice carrying across water. You've witnessed the cultivation. You belong to us now. I swam with everything, ignoring numbness propagating through limbs. Crew of Glacier deployed ropes, nets. I seized a line, hands hauled me up hull. I collapsed on steel deck, shivering so violently I thought bones would fracture. Glanced back. Harding was still in water, struggling, gripping an ice fragment, but water surrounding him was transforming. A tendril of azure liquid shot from shelf, arced over gap like a bridge, struck water adjacent to Harding, didn't disperse, solidified instantaneously, forming ice spear that penetrated his flotation vest. Harding screamed as he was elevated. Tendril retracted, dragging him back to shelf, back to Rhodes. No, I yelled, attempting to stand. Legs wouldn't function. Observed as Major Harding was dragged up wave face. Rhodes extended, took his hand, resembled a greeting. Harding's struggle ceased. Violet luminescence washed over him. He rotated to observe vessel one final time. Expression wasn't terror anymore. It was tranquility. Then, wave crested and descended, consuming them both. Ice shelf smoothed over, boundary pristine again. Get US evacuated, Glacier Captain shouted. Full reverse, exaction now. Vessel shuddered as engines roared. We reversed from shelf, fracturing through thin ice, establishing distance between us and nightmare. I lay on deck, staring back at white continent. Fog rolled in again, concealing barrier, hiding metropolis, hiding deceased, but I could still hear it. Over engines, over wind. Thump, 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 thump. Wasn't exclusively on ice anymore. It was in my consciousness. Don't recall when I ceased hearing the pulse. Perhaps when Glacier finally liberated from pack ice, engines screaming like wounded organisms. Or perhaps hours later when I awakened in medical bay, wrapped in wool blankets that felt like abrasive material, shivering so intensely the cot rattled. What I recall is the silence. Not quiet of a compartment, but profound empty silence of a world that had been shrieking at me for days. Vibration in deck plates was mechanical now. Pistons, shafts. The organic resonance, that deep thump that rattled bones, was obliterated. But silence has a method of being louder than noise. Retreat from raw sector was catastrophic. We lost another destroyer en route, the USS Farragut. Official documentation states catastrophic boiler detonation due to ice intake, but I observed photographs taken by rear gunner on Coral Sea. Water surrounding her stern wasn't boiling from explosion. It was solidifying. Massive translucent appendage of ice rose from depths, wrapped around fantail, dragged her beneath. No distress transmission, just vanished. We limped north. Broken fleet evacuating from a continent that had awakened. Weather pursued us 48 hours. Relentless, unnatural blizzard coating vessels in gray ice. Personnel on deck watch reported observing configurations in squall, gliding alongside. Not aircraft, not avian. Angular crystalline configurations, soaring on wings of frozen mist. Didn't assault, just observed, escorting us to boundary. Then we crossed the 60th parallel. Instantaneous. One instant, gale force winds and blinding precipitation. Next, clouds fractured, sun emerged, weak but authentic. Ocean calmed. Temperature rose 30 degrees in 90 minutes, like stepping from a walk-in freezer and sealing the door. That line on charts wasn't simply a coordinate. It was a boundary, territorial marker. Whatever existed behind the ice barrier had a range bound to cold, couldn't pursue us into temperate ocean. Salt water, thermal energy, poison to them. We made port in Argentina 3 weeks later. First action, quarantine. Entire task force locked down. Military police with armbands I didn't recognize. Boarded vessels. Confiscated everything. Logbooks, cameras, correspondence, personal journals. Went through Glacier with radiation detectors and chemical analyzers. I was debriefed in windowless compartment by a man in charcoal suit who smoked cigarettes reeking like burning synthetic. He didn't inquire what I observed. He informed me what I observed. He informed me what I observed. You encountered unexpected cyclonic conditions, he said, sliding type statement across metal table. Severe weather caused hallucinations from hypothermia and sensory deprivation. Casualties were incidents from structural icing and equipment malfunction. Major Harding died a hero securing loose cargo in the storm. I examined document, then him. He didn't die on deck, I said, voice hoarse. He died in water. He was extracted. I witnessed him. He was serene. The man didn't blink. Hypothermia causes warmth sensation in terminal stages. Sergeant, paradoxical undressing. Victims appear peaceful. Sign the document. I signed it. What alternative did I possess? 26 years old, exhausted, terrified, just wanted to return home, observe grass, feel thermal energy that didn't originate from dying engine or burning transport. They discharged me 4 months later. Medical discharged, combat fatigue. Pleasant euphemism for fractured. Spent 18 months in VA hospital in Nebraska staring at wheat fields, attempting to convince myself the world was solid. That ground beneath feet wasn't thin membrane over hollow respiring organism. Dr. Keller didn't survive the voyage home. They stated pneumonia en route, but I comprehend better. They stated pneumonia en route, but I comprehend better. Week before we docked, I observed 2 military police transporting a body container from brig on Coral Sea. It was small, excessively small, resembled a bundle of desiccated branches. Keller retained the specimens, didn't he? Perhaps one excessive. Perhaps ice didn't require entire ocean to proliferate. Perhaps just required a host. Seaman Davis survived, technically. Spent remainder of his existence in psychiatric facility in upstate Massachusetts. I visited him once in '56. He sat by window, staring at glass of water. Wouldn't consume it. Wouldn't contact it. Just observed condensation descend the exterior. It's waiting, he whispered. Not observing up. It's patient. Water has memory, Sergeant. Remembers where it originated. Remembers the metropolis. I never returned. But the world transformed after 1952. You could observe it if you recognize where to examine. Antarctic Treaty signed in 1961, 14 nations, including U.S. and Soviet Union, prepared to detonate nuclear weapons over Berlin, suddenly agreed to demilitarize the continent. No installations, no weapons evaluation, no mineral extraction. They designated it peace, sanctuary for research. You don't demilitarize a continent because you appreciate wildlife. You execute it because you are terrified, because you discovered something that terrified both sides of ideological divide. You execute it to maintain distance, maintain noise minimized, maintain thermal energy excluded. Because that's the mechanism, isn't it? Thermal energy. Dr. Keller was correct. The anomaly, it consumes thermal energy. It's a heat sink. More energy we transported vessels, aircraft, explosives. The more powerful it became, we awakened it, knocked on entrance with high explosive. And it responded. I contemplate Rhodes frequently, what he articulated before he went silent. It's magnificent. Resembles night sky but stars blinking. I wonder if he's still beneath there. If Harding is with him. Are they deceased or something else? Part of cultivation, cultivators, and metropolis of crystal, tending particulate, waiting for next harvest. Sometimes late night, Residents quiet, wind howling. I extract the one artifact I managed to retain. Military police missed it, concealed inside brute lining. It's a page from Dr. Two, killer's notebook. Must have torn it, given it when reloaded transports, though I don't recall. Handwriting is frantic, scrawled in pencil that penetrated deep. It's a sketch, diagram of ice shelf, cross-section. At summit, ice we traversed. Below that, water. Below water, connecting seafloor to ice, are roots. Massive, tangled roots descending into crust. At bottom of page, 3 words. It isn't indigenous. Contemplate that. It isn't indigenous. Didn't evolve here, crashed here, or was planted. Antarctica isn't a continent. It's a containment apparatus, cryogenic chamber. The magnitude of a landmass, designed to maintain something dormant. Ice isn't adversary. Ice is enclosure. And we attempted to melt the barriers. I observed news today, reports about ice shelves collapsing, massive fractures in Larsen sector. Scientists state global warming, rising oceans, climate transformation. They're correct. Planet's heating, but they don't comprehend what that thermal energy is executing beneath there. They observe ice melting, concern about water. I observe enclosure weakening, concern about prisoner. Last year, satellite photograph leaked online displayed thermal bloom in Ross sector. Massive crimson mass deep inland, precisely where Outpost Charlie was. Government scrubbed it within hours, claimed sensor malfunction, but I preserved it, I magnified. Center of crimson bloom, there was configuration. Geometric, perfect hexagonal matrix of apertures in ice. Respiration vents, they're opening again. I'm an elderly man now. Cold penetrates joints easier. Maintain thermostat at 85, even in summer. Can't tolerate being cold, reminds me of ozone and metallic smell. Reminds me of ozone and metallic smell. Reminds me of being observed by horizon that isn't there. But primarily I maintain warmth because I recognize it's approaching. Treaties won't persist eternally. Ice won't persist eternally. We're pumping thermal energy into atmosphere daily, nourishing the entity we should starve, elevating thermostat on dormant God. And one day, probably imminently, ice will fracture, not from explosives this time, but from slow relentless pressure of warming world. Barrier will collapse, metropolis of crystal exposed to solar radiation. When that occurs, ocean won't simply rise, it will transform. I hope I'm deceased before then. Hope I never observe water transform azure and viscous. Hope I never hear that sound again. Dump. Dump. But sometimes when I'm positioned by ocean, observing south, I think I can already hear it. Faint, distant, but intensifying. Pulse of world or pulse of what's consuming it. They state war is catastrophe. I've witnessed war, observed personnel die in mud and sand. That's not catastrophe. That's simply human. Catastrophe is cold. Catastrophe is magnificent. Catastrophe is metropolis of crystal, waiting for ice to melt so it can welcome us all inside. So when you observe world charts, observe that massive white expanse at bottom. Don't think empty. Don't think frontier. Think of it as a seal, and pray to whatever deity you believe in that we never, ever pry it open again. Because Rhodes was correct. They are observing, they are waiting, and they are starving. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Now, I really want to know, what did you think about this story? Did it keep you hooked, or did it leave you with questions? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments, because your feedback genuinely helped shape the next story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Your support means more than you know. I'll see you in the next story with something even deeper.